The doors of the Providence courtroom swing open, and she walks in like it's a runway. 20-year-old Ava Kingsley, daughter of one of the most powerful senators in the country, hides behind oversized designer sunglasses, her heels clicking like she owns every inch of the floor. What she doesn't know is that in this room, her last name is worth exactly 0, and Judge Frank Caprio is about to prove it. On paper, it's just speeding, ignoring an officer, and blocking a reserved parking space. But behind those cold words lies a crying child in a wheelchair, a missed therapy session, and a sentence Ava hasn't heard in years. No. Before we go further, tell me this. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Drop your city and local time in the comments. And if you believe real justice should never bow to power, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Judge Frank Caprio lifts his eyes from the docket, studying the young woman sitting before him. The sunglasses remain on, even though the lights in the courtroom are soft and forgiving. Ava leans back in her chair, legs crossed flawlessly, posture relaxed in a way that tells the world she has never feared consequences. Not real ones. Not the kind handed down in rooms like this. Miss Ava Kingsley, Caprio begins, his voice calm but edged with decades of equal justice. You are charged with 3 violations: excessive speeding, failure to comply with a lawful order, and unauthorized use of a disability access parking space. Ava doesn't flinch. In fact, a grin tugs at the corner of her lips, small but sharp. I acknowledge the charges, she says, waving a hand as if dismissing a waiter. Can we move along? My assistant can pay electronically. A murmur ripples across the gallery. A man in the back shakes his head. Another woman exhales tightly, the kind of exhale reserved for people who've worked 2 jobs their whole life just to pay parking tickets. Judge Caprio notices it all, but his focus never leaves Ava. This is not a drive-through window, Miss Kingsley, he replies. We do not operate on convenience. We operate on understanding. Ava's smile widens mocking now. I understand perfectly. My father practically funds half the judicial programs in this state. Surely we don't need to make this theatrical. Her voice drips entitlement. She isn't trying to hide it. She's proud of it. That is the first real crack, the moment something shifts behind Caprio's steady expression. Not anger, disappointment. The kind you feel when a stranger reveals too much of themselves too quickly, and none of it is good. People in the courtroom sit up straighter. Tell me, Caprio says softly, why were you parked in a disability access space? I was running late, Ava replies, shrugging. There were no other spots. It was hardly a big deal. Not a big deal, Caprio repeats, turning the phrase over as if tasting something bitter. Do you know who that spot was reserved for? Ava lifts her chin. Someone with a blue placard, and I'm sure they managed. Let's not dramatize it. She says manage like she's talking about an errand boy. Caprio folds his hands. This is the moment he tests her not legally, but morally. Have you ever known someone with limited mobility? Ava tilts her head, amused. Judge, I grew up around diplomats, CEOs, senators, not exactly the wheelchair demographic. Gasps ripple outward. A court officer's jaw tightens. Even Ava's own bodyguard shifts uncomfortably. But she doesn't notice. She's too focused on her performance, on being the bold, unbothered Kingsley heiress who always gets the final word. You seem proud of that answer, Caprio observes quietly. It's just reality, she replies with a shrug. People in power move fast. The world adjusts. The law does not adjust, Caprio answers. Not for titles, not for wealth, and certainly not for arrogance. For the first time, Ava's smile flickers, not falling apart, but wavering. Narrator voice creeps into the room like another presence. Some people spend their whole lives trying to prove they're special. Others only need one moment to learn that being special has nothing to do with power. Caprio taps a finger lightly on the desk. Where do you live, Miss Kingsley? In D.C. Mostly, she answers, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. Our home in Rhode Island is, well, a place we visit when it's politically relevant. Do you live with your parents? Ava laughs, brittle, humorless sound. Live with them. Judge, my father works more hours than anyone you've ever met. And my mother practically sleeps in her office at Harvard. We're efficient. We FaceTime sometimes for holidays. Efficient, Caprio repeats, a curious word to describe family. Ava rolls her eyes. Judge, with all due respect, can we stay on topic? This is about parking and speeding, not therapy. But Caprio does not move past it. And where, he asks, do you fit in this efficient family? Ava pauses just a second. But it's enough. It's the silence of someone who has never, not once, been asked that question without a political motive attached. Wherever I'm needed, she finally answers. Her expression stays cool, but her voice lowers. Campaign photos, press events, volunteer drives. I fill the picture. I make the story look relatable. Narrator whispers to the viewers, if you've ever felt like a prop in someone else's life, you already understand more about Ava Kingsley than she understands about herself. Caprio leans forward. And what do you do for yourself, Miss Kingsley? She blinks, genuinely confused. What does that mean? A hobby, a passion, something that belongs to you, not your father's reputation. Ava scoffs, but the edge in her voice falters. I don't have that luxury. Everything I do has to reflect well on the Kingsley name. Caprio shakes his head slowly. That's not luxury. That's confinement. Ava stiffens. She's too proud to admit it, but the word hits her like a stone. Judge, she says sharply, my father doesn't appreciate unnecessary scrutiny. He's expecting a report on how quickly this will be resolved. Oh, Caprio asks, does he know you're here? He knows I was pulled over, she replies. He said he'd make a few calls. And does that comfort you? Ava hesitates. The answer should be yes. It has always been yes. But today something feels different. It's normal, she says. That's how our world works. Caprio studies her with an expression that is not pity, but clarity. Miss Kingsley, he says gently, you've lived your whole life seeing power as protection. But here's the truth. Real character is learned the first time someone tells you no, and no one steps in to fix it. The courtroom goes still. Ava takes a slow breath. It's the first vulnerable breath she's taken since entering the room. Are you trying to make an example of me? No, Caprio replies softly. I'm trying to introduce you to yourself. The gallery shifts, the air thick with anticipation, because even the walls can feel something changing in her, whether she wants it to or not. Ava crosses her arms, but this time it looks less like defiance and more like armor. Judge, I can't change who I am because of one parking mistake. That, Caprio says, is where you're wrong. He pulls a manila folder from the bench. Inside it is a letter, a story, a truth Ava has no idea is coming. And when he opens it, the courtroom stops breathing. Judge Caprio lifts the folded letter with a kind of reverence, slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial, not to intimidate her, but because he understands what this letter carries. It is not legal jargon nor a political document. It is something far rarer inside a courtroom. Truth spoken by someone with no power at all. Ava, he says, still holding the letter closed, before I read this, I need you to understand something. This did not come from the police department, nor from a lawyer, nor from anyone connected to your family. She frowns, one brow arching in impatience. Then who is it from? Caprio opens the letter. It is from a mother. Her name is Melissa Grant. A ripple of recognition moves across Ava's expression, just a flicker. A memory she brushed aside. A moment she never thought would follow her here. Who? She asks, but her tone is too quick, too defensive, like someone trying to dodge a punch she sees coming too late. Caprio begins reading, his voice steady. Your Honor, I'm writing because something happened last week that I can't forget. I tried to access the wheelchair ramp for my son, Jacob, who is 8 years old and unable to walk. When I asked the driver of the luxury white SUV to move her vehicle so I could lower the ramp, she laughed. The courtroom's air pressure seems to shift. People lean forward. Ava's eyes narrow. "This is exaggerated," she snaps. I didn't laugh at Caprio holds up a hand, not harsh, but firm. He reads on. "She told me, 'Relax, sweetheart. My heels hurt worse than anything your little chair deals with.'" A gasp erupts from someone near the back. Even the bodyguard, large and stoic, looks at the floor. Ava's cheeks flush, not with shame, but with the instinct to fight. That is not exactly how it happened. Caprio lowers the letter and meets her gaze. "Then tell me exactly how it happened." Ava opens her mouth, but nothing comes out. Because now, for the first time, she realizes something she didn't before. Everyone here heard her speak earlier. Everyone heard the tone she used, the smugness, the ease with which cruelty slid off her tongue as if it were basic vocabulary. So no one in the room is ready to believe she said anything kinder. Caprio returns to the letter. "My son missed his therapy appointment that day. It's one of the sessions he needs to prevent muscle tightening that causes him terrible pain. He cried the entire night." A silence descends that is not passive. It's heavy. It presses against the walls. Ava swallows hard. She looks down at her manicured hands as though seeing them for the first time. For years, those hands have held expensive handbags, VIP passes, polished microphones, but never responsibility. "Your Honor," she says quietly, "people exaggerate when emotions are high. I didn't know Caprio stops reading. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. That's unfair." "No," he answers softly. "What's unfair is an 8-year-old crying from pain because someone older, stronger, and more privileged decided their comfort mattered more." Ava's breath catches. For a moment, she looks almost human, stripped of the armor her father's name gave her. But the instinct to defend herself is strong. "You're acting like I physically harmed someone," she says. "It was a parking mistake." The judge's jaw tightens, not in anger, but in profound sadness. And then he nods to the bailiff. "Show the footage." The screen flickers to life. The body cam video fills the room. Ava, standing next to her gleaming SUV, sunglasses on, flipping her hair. The officer, asking politely for her license. Her laughing audibly. The sound ricochets around the room, like something embarrassing no one can escape. Then Melissa's voice trembles into the audio. "Ma'am, please. I just need enough space to open the ramp." And on the recording, Ava responds, "Then maybe try a smaller van. Or plan better." A hushed, horrified, "Oh my God," escapes someone near the front row. A young woman in the gallery covers her mouth with both hands. A bailiff mutters under his breath, "Unreal." Ava sits frozen. She doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, doesn't move, because she has never heard herself from the outside. Not once. She has lived her whole life in curated sound bites and flattering angles. This raw footage is the first honest mirror she's ever looked into. When the video ends, a suffocating quiet settles across the courtroom. Ava whispers, That wasn't meant to be cruel. I was joking. They took it wrong." Caprio's voice, low and controlled, slices through that excuse. "Some words cannot be twisted into jokes, Miss Kingsley. They reveal exactly who we are in moments when we think no one is watching." Ava blinks fast, her eyes shimmering, not fully tears, but cracks. "You don't understand my life," she says, voice trembling. "Everyone is always judging me, expecting perfection. I was stressed." Caprio interrupts, but gently. "No, you were careless. And it hurt someone." She lifts her head, jaw tightening. "I'm not a monster." "No one said you were," Caprio replies. "But you behaved like someone who has never been told that other people's pain matters." He pauses, letting silence teach its own lessons. Then he says something the courtroom will remember for a long time. "You told me earlier that you never hear the word no. Today you heard it from yourself. from the version of you caught on that camera, and I believe even she would be ashamed of what she sees." Ava looks away, not out of arrogance, out of fear, because for the first time in her life, she feels the edges of guilt pressing in. Judge Caprio. "What happens now?" she whispers. He takes a long breath. "You will speak with Mrs. Grant and her son, not to apologize with money, not to fix your image, but to understand." Ava's head jerks upward. "You can't force me to meet them." "No," Caprio agrees. "I cannot force understanding." He closes the file. "But if you refuse, I will release this footage and this letter to the media. And the entire country will see how a senator's daughter treated a disabled child." All color drains from Ava's face. He isn't threatening her. He's offering her a choice she has never been given before. A real one. "When?" Ava whispers. "You have 24 hours, Caprio says. "Use them to prove that you are more than the girl in that video." A tear escapes a single one. She wipes it quickly, pretending it never happened. The judge watches without gloating, without satisfaction, only with hope, because he has seen thousands of people sit where Ava sits now, and he knows that every transformation begins the same way, with the painful realization that you cannot run from who you are, and the even more painful decision to become someone different. Ava rises slowly, no longer walking like she owns the courtroom. For the first time, she walks like she belongs in it. As she reaches the doors, the narrator's voice trails after her, like a soft echo. This is the part of the story where most people would turn away. But sometimes the first person we need to face is ourselves. Early the next morning, the sky over Providence is the color of cold steel-flat gray and unforgiving. Ava Kingsley sits in the back of a rideshare car, staring out the window at neighborhoods she has never driven through, streets she didn't know existed, lives she has never once thought about. Her hands grip her phone, but for the first time in her life, she isn't scrolling. She's holding onto it like an anchor. She's never been without her father's network, his advisors, his polished campaign handlers. But today, for the first time in 20 years, she's completely on her own. The driver stops in front of a modest brick apartment building with peeling paint and rusted railings. Nothing about it resembles the crisp glass and marble of her family's homes. The hallway inside smells faintly of cleaning solution and faint coffee. A stroller sits folded by the stairs, a reminder that families here live in tight spaces with no room for excess. Ava takes a breath shaky, shallow, and knocks. The door opens an inch on a chain lock. A woman's wary eyes appear. "Melissa Grant. Miss Kingsley," she says carefully. "You actually came." Ava forces a smile, but it collapses instantly. "Mrs. Grant, I wanted to talk. To fix things." The door closes briefly. Ava hears the chain sliding, then it opens fully. "You can come in," Melissa says, stepping aside. "But if you're here to pay me off, save your time." Ava walks inside. The apartment is small but warm. Toys arranged neatly in bins. A whiteboard full of therapy appointments and reminders hangs on the wall. A wheelchair-accessible ramp leads to the hallway. A pediatric walker sits near the couch, and on that couch sits Jacob, 8 years old, brown hair, thin arms, a smile that tries to appear brave even when he's unsure. He looks at Ava with wide eyes, the kind that don't hate, because hate is a skill children learn slowly. But he doesn't trust her either. Not yet. Ava's throat tightens. "Hi," she says softly. Jacob raises a hand in the smallest wave. Melissa gestures toward the kitchen table. "We can talk there." Ava sits, smoothing her cheap borrowed jackets. She left the expensive one at home, not wanting to show up draped in money like armor. Before she can speak, Melissa rests both hands on the table and says, "I'm not interested in money. I'm not interested in anything political. I just want you to understand what you did." Ava nods. I want to." "No," Melissa replies gently. "You don't want to yet, but maybe you're willing to try." Ava looks down. She has no script for this. No talking points. No applause lines. Nothing to hide behind. Can you tell me, she asks quietly, what happened after? After I blocked your ramp. Melissa sits back, exhaling slowly. Not dramatic, just tired. You made us late for therapy, she says. Physical therapy. For Jacob, missing even one session can set him back days, sometimes weeks. She turns toward the room where Jacob sits playing with a small toy train on his wheelchair tray. That night, Melissa continues. He cried himself to sleep. He thought it was his fault. Ava's breath catches. His fault. He said maybe he wasn't trying hard enough in therapy. Maybe that's why the world didn't want to help him. He asked me if God gave him the wrong body. The words hit harder than any judgment in the courtroom. Ava presses her hand to her lips. I didn't know. That's the point, Melissa says. You didn't know because you didn't look. Ava closes her eyes. I was rude. I was stressed. I said something stupid. I didn't think you were cruel, Melissa corrects softly. And you didn't have to be. The honesty is sharp, but it's not an attack. It's a clean cut, not a blow. A moment passes. Then a small voice speaks. Mom? Jacob wheels himself a little closer, eyes fixed on Ava. Is that the lady from the video? Ava's cheeks burn. She feels her chest tighten. She doesn't want to be that lady anymore. But she is. Yes. Melissa answers gently. That's her. Jacob nods, studying her the way only children can purely, openly, without filters. Ava forces herself to meet his eyes. I'm sorry, she whispers. Truly. Jacob shrugs in a way that is almost adult. It's okay. But Melissa shakes her head. Honey, she's here to understand, not to be forgiven. Ava feels tears sting her eyes, not dramatic sobs, just raw human ache. I want to understand, she says. I do. Melissa sits down again, folding her hands. Do you know what it's like to navigate the world with a wheelchair? Ava shakes her head. Then let me show you. She stands and walks to a closet. When she returns, she's holding a small pediatric wheelchair, the kind used in therapy centers to help parents demonstrate training techniques. Sit, Melissa says. Ava stares. What? No, this is sit, Melissa repeats calmly. You want to understand. Start here. Ava hesitates. She feels ridiculous, embarrassed, small. Good. A voice inside her whispers. Maybe for once. You should feel small. She sits. Melissa locks the footrest in place, adjusts the wheels, and steps back. Now, Melissa says, imagine trying to get through a world that wasn't built for you. Imagine being mocked while doing it. Ava pushes the wheels experimentally. They squeak. They resist. They wobble. Her movement is clumsy, awkward. Jacob watches with a little smile. You're not very good at it. Despite herself, Ava lets out a tiny laugh. I know. Melissa kneels to eye level with her. Empathy, she says softly, is understanding someone else's struggle even when it's not your own. Ava's voice breaks. How do you stay so calm? Melissa offers a weary smile, because anger is heavy, and my son's chair already weighs enough. Ava feels something collapse inside her, something loud, armored, and brittle. I want to make this right, she whispers. Melissa nods. Then listen, learn, and stop thinking of other people as inconveniences. Jacob wheels closer and reaches into his backpack. From it, he pulls a small keychain, a silver heart, with a tiny wheelchair symbol engraved in the center. Here, he says, I have two. You can have one. Ava stares at it, stunned. Jacob, why would you give this to me? Because you looked sad, he says simply. No moral lecture, no anger, just a child's simple, devastating kindness. Ava's eyes fill with tears, real, unfiltered. She reaches for the keychain with trembling fingers. I'll wear it, she promises, every day. Jacob nods, satisfied. For a long time, the three of them sit quietly in the small living room. No politics, no cameras, no titles. Just three people trying to understand one another. Finally, Melissa speaks again. Miss Kingsley, would you like to help Jacob with his stretching routine today? Ava nods without hesitation. Yes, please show me how. Melissa guides her through each movement, every careful adjustment, every precaution. At first, Ava fumbles, clumsy and nervous. But she learns, she steadies. She focuses, and for the first time in her life, she isn't performing, she's participating. When they finish, Jacob smiles and says, "You did good." Ava laughs softly. "Thank you." As she stands to leave, Melissa walks her to the door. "You know," Melissa says quietly, "you're not the girl from the video right now." Ava swallows. "Who am I?" "Someone willing to change," Melissa replies. "That's worth more than any apology." Ava steps into the hallway with the keychain clutched in her hand. The metal is warm from Jacob's palm. The hallway seems a little brighter, the world a little larger. And for the first time since she entered Judge Caprio's courtroom, Ava Kingsley feels something she has never felt before: the beginnings of humility. When Ava steps into the courthouse the following morning, there is no entourage behind her, no designer sunglasses masking her expression, no clicking heels announcing her arrival like a royal entrance. She walks in quietly, almost cautiously, cradling the small silver heart keychain in her hand as if it were fragile. But her moment of calm is shattered the instant the courtroom doors swing open again. A powerful presence fills the room. Senator Daniel Kingsley strides in. He doesn't walk so much as command the floor, moving with a confidence that has manipulated political chambers, lobbyist dinners, and national interviews for decades. His suit is flawless. His tie is perfectly knotted. His expression is the carefully curated blend of concern and authority that wins elections. Two aides scramble behind him. One carries a briefcase, another carries a folder labeled "Talking Points." Several people in the gallery sit up straighter. A few whisper. A few pretend not to look. But there is no pretending with a figure like Daniel Kingsley. His presence radiates influence, expectation, and an almost suffocating sense that whatever he wants, he gets. His eyes lock onto Ava. She tenses not in resentment, but in dread. "Dad," she murmurs. He doesn't acknowledge her. He marches straight to the front and faces the judge. "Your Honor," he says in a practiced voice that has charmed governors and intimidated rivals, "I'd like a word before we proceed." Judge Caprio remains seated, but his stillness carries more power than the senator's theatrics. "You may speak, Senator Kingsley," he replies evenly, "but understand this clearly. You are not here as an authority. You're here as the parent of a defendant. Nothing more." The senator's jaw twitches just slightly, but he swallows the reaction. He switches on the smooth tone he uses in televised hearings. "I'm certain we can resolve this quickly," he begins. "My daughter was placed into a situation that spiraled unnecessarily. Officer reports were exaggerated, emotions high. I've reviewed the footage. This can be handled internally to avoid undue harm to her reputation." Ava closes her eyes. She doesn't want this. Not now. Not after yesterday. Judge Caprio clasps his hands. His voice is calm, but each word lands with a firm weight. "No." The senator blinks. It is rare for him to hear that word. Rarer still in a tone that doesn't fear consequences. "I don't think you understand," Kingsley continues, slipping into a more pointed register. "My office has already spoken with state officials. They're prepared to." Caprio interrupts, his voice like a blade. "This is not Washington. This is a courtroom. And I decide what is resolved here." Silence ripples outward across the gallery like a slow-moving wave. Some people actually lean forward, stunned. Others dare to smile. The senator straightens his shoulders. "With respect, Judge, my daughter is being used for sensationalism. We know how rapidly a minor incident can become political fuel. I am here to prevent any further damage." "Damage to whom?" Caprio asks. "Your daughter, or your brand." A few spectators exhale sharply. It's a question no one ever asks a man like Daniel Kingsley, not in public. Ava grips her keychain tighter. She feels heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from recognition. Exactly what Caprio said is true. Her father shifts tactics, dropping his voice into something softer, almost paternal. Ava, sweetheart, you don't have to be subjected to this. She stiffens, her heart torn between instinct and awakening. Judge Caprio turns gently toward her. Miss Kingsley, would you like your father to speak on your behalf? She opens her mouth. The senator cuts in. Of course she would. She has nothing further to say. But Ava lifts her hand just slightly toward him. Dad, please. Stop. Her father pauses mid-sentence, startled. She's never cut him off publicly before. I want to speak, Ava says quietly. The room freezes. Daniel Kingsley's eyes widen as if she's betrayed him on a national stage. Ava, this isn't the time to improvise. Let me handle no. Her voice cracks, but she doesn't retreat. That's the problem. You always handle everything. Her father looks at her sharply. I'm protecting you. You're protecting your image, she replies. This isn't your hearing, it's mine. Judge Caprio nods, once permission granted. Ava steps forward. Her voice trembles at first, but each word grows steadier. Yesterday, I met Jacob and his mom, she begins. I saw what my actions did. I saw what it means when someone like me treats someone like them as an inconvenience. She swallows. The courtroom leans in. And I don't want you to fix that for me, Dad. I don't want a staff member writing an apology statement. I don't want a press release crafted by a strategist. I want to face this. Her father's mouth falls slightly open. Ava, he says, shocked. You're emotional. Think about the implications. No. She shakes her head. For once, I am thinking. Judge Caprio watches quietly but intently. He recognizes this moment, the fragile hinge on which a young life swings. Daniel Kingsley exhales, frustrated. Your Honor, you are taking advantage of her vulnerability. She's overwhelmed. It's irresponsible to Caprio stands. He doesn't shout. He doesn't scold. He simply speaks with an authority deeper than political power. Senator Kingsley, your daughter did not learn entitlement on her own. Entitlement is taught, it is modeled, and it begins at home. The senator stiffens as though struck. Ava whispers, Judge. But Caprio continues, not cruelly but truthfully. She mocked a disabled child not because she is evil, but because she has spent her life believing the world bends for her. That is not a failure of privilege. That is a failure of guidance. The senator's eyes glimmer with anger and something else he would never name aloud. Maybe guilt. He grips the back of the bench, knuckles whitening. I have provided for my daughter. I've given her opportunities and withheld accountability, Caprio finishes, which is the most necessary opportunity of all. A hush spreads like snowfall. Ava takes a trembling breath. Dad, I'm asking you to stop speaking for me. Her father looks utterly disoriented. Why? Because for the first time in my life, she says, I'm actually saying something that matters to me. Her father struggles for words, real words, not rhetoric. But nothing comes. Judge Caprio softens his tone. Senator, your daughter has begun something important here. Let her continue. Slowly, Daniel Kingsley steps back, stunned into silence. Ava faces the judge. I'm not the girl in that video anymore, she says. I'm trying not to be. And that, Caprio replies, gently, is what brings people to this courtroom, not punishment. Transformation. Her eyes fill, not with humiliation, but something gentler. Relief. Judge Caprio's next words are almost fatherly. You may sit down, Miss Kingsley. She does. Her father lingers a moment longer, as though waiting for someone to tell him what to do next. But no one does. He looks at his daughter, really looks, perhaps for the first time without thinking of photo ops or political narratives. Then, defeated and strangely small, He turns and walks out of the room. There is no applause, but something in the air shifts. A weight lifts off Ava's shoulders. A shadow lifts from her life, and in its place stands something she has not felt in years, not approval, not protection, but freedom. Judge Caprio folds his hands and studies her with a thoughtful, almost gentle gaze. Miss Kingsley, he says, for the first time today, you spoke as yourself rather than as your father's daughter. She wipes her eyes with the sleeve of her plain sweater. It feels strange. Strange, Caprio agrees, is often the first step toward becoming real. Ava exhales a long, shaky breath and grips the silver heart at her chest. Narrator's voice returns, quiet and steady. Some children inherit mansions, others inherit expectations, but the hardest inheritance to overcome is silence. Here, in this small Rhode Island courtroom, Ava Kingsley breaks hers. The courtroom feels strangely hollow after Senator Kingsley leaves, as if the force of his presence vacuumed the air out with him. The heavy oak doors swing shut behind him with a muted thud, and the silence that follows is not peaceful. It's revealing. Ava sits alone at the defendant's table, shoulders drawn inward, fingertips brushing the small silver heart hanging from her pocket. Her eyes stay fixed on the floor, as if afraid to look up and see whether the room sees her differently now or exactly the same. Judge Caprio studies her for a long moment, not with judgment, with thought, with patience, with the kind of attention no one has ever offered her, without an agenda attached. Finally, he speaks. Miss Kingsley, he says, stand for a moment. Ava rises slowly, hesitantly, no longer with the polished poise of a senator's daughter, accustomed to cameras, but with the uncertainty of a young woman unsure what version of herself she's allowed to be. Caprio begins gently. Yesterday, you met with Mrs. Grant and her son. I would like to hear in your own words what that encounter meant. Ava swallows. Her voice is softer than before, softer than anyone in this room has ever heard it. It was the first time, she says quietly, that someone looked at me not as the Kingsley daughter, but as the girl who hurt their child. She pauses, breathing unevenly. And it was the first time I actually let myself feel what that meant. The room remains silent. Even the bailiff, usually stoic, leans in slightly. Caprio nods. Go on. I've spent my whole life being told what moments should feel like, Ava continues, how to react, what to say, who to be. Everything was a performance, a message, an image. She grips the keychain in her hand. But when Jacob handed me this, he wasn't thinking about politics, or influence, or the Kingsley name. Her voice trembles. He just saw someone who looked sad. The simplicity of that strikes her harder than anything else. She presses the keychain gently, as if reminding herself it's real. I didn't know people could be kind without wanting something in return. Judge Caprio tilts his head. You never experienced kindness without conditions. Ava hesitates, her eyes lower. Not from adults, she admits. Kindness was always strategic. Everything in my life was. I was raised to be useful. A symbol. Proof my father was a family man. But no one ever asked what I wanted. Not really. The judge steps down from the bench, something he rarely does, except when he needs to be closer to the truth. He walks toward the defense table and rests his hands lightly on the wood. Miss Kingsley, he says, voice deep with empathy, powerful families often build perfect images. But perfect images cast long shadows, and children grow up inside them. Ava tilts her head slightly, as if no one has ever articulated her life so precisely. I spent years thinking that if people saw me as perfect, she whispers, someone would finally care about who I actually was. The judge shakes his head softly. No one can care about someone who isn't allowed to exist. A raw, stunned silence follows. Ava blinks quickly, wiping tears with her sleeve. Not the kind meant to win sympathy or soften headlines. Real tears, unfiltered and unperformed. The judge returns to the bench, but his voice remains intimate. There is something I need to show you. He nods to the bailiff. The bailiff steps forward and hands him a sealed document. Caprio breaks the seal, reads the contents, and his expression changes, not in anger, not in shock, but in a solemn disappointment that sends a chill down the room. This, Caprio says, came from your father's office late last night. Ava's body tenses. He sent something else. Yes, Caprio replies softly. He has withdrawn his previous acknowledgement of your behavior. He now asserts that you were provoked by Mrs. Ricard Grant, and that she, quote, instigated a confrontation for attention. The courtroom erupts, gasps, whispers, disbelief. Ava's face drains of color. He blamed her. The judge nods. He also claims your recorded statements were manipulated by the officer and taken out of context. Ava's voice cracks. That's not true. Of course it is not true, Caprio responds firmly, and you know that. But your father is trying to rewrite the narrative so you never have to face yourself. Ava sinks into her seat, horror washing over her. He didn't even talk to me first. No, Caprio says, because he wasn't writing about you. He was writing about his reputation. Ava presses her palms to her forehead. I don't want him to protect me like this, she whispers. Not anymore. Judge Caprio watches her unravel, not in weakness, but in awakening. You said something earlier, Miss Kingsley, he says. You said everything in your life has been strategic. She nods faintly. Then let me tell you this, Caprio continues. True accountability is the opposite of strategy. The words hit her like a soft blow. I don't know how to do that, she admits. I don't know how to be anything without some script or some expectation. I know, Caprio replies gently, which is why what I'm about to say is important. He takes a breath, then speaks with solemn clarity. This courtroom is the first place where your last name does not decide who you are. Here, you earn who you are. A shiver passes through her, fear and relief intertwined. Ava lifts her head. Yesterday, after I met Jacob and his mom, I went back again. After dinner. Caprio's eyebrows rise. You did. She nods. I wanted to understand more. I asked Melissa how she stays so calm, how she carries so much weight without anger. And what did she tell you? Ava's voice softens. She said, anger is heavy. In my son's chair is already enough weight. The line hangs in the air. Simple, powerful, true. Judge Caprio lets it echo before speaking again. It sounds like you didn't just apologize, he says slowly. You listened. Ava wipes another tear, nodding. She gave me something, she whispers, pulling the small silver heart from her pocket. She told me to wear it whenever I forget that people move slower than my schedule. Caprio smiles sadly, warmly. She offered you grace, Miss Kingsley, and grace is much harder to earn than forgiveness. Ava takes a shaky breath. I want to do better. I don't want to go back to who I was. That, Caprio says, is the first honest step you've taken in years. A long pause. Then Caprio leans forward, folding his hands. Miss Kingsley, he says gently, I need to ask you something very important. Ava stiffens. What is it? The judge's voice is soft. Who are you when no one is watching? Her breath catches, because she doesn't know, not yet. But for the first time in her life, she finally wants to find out. Caprio lets the silence settle before speaking again. This courtroom isn't just determining a penalty. It's determining direction, and direction requires choices. So let me offer you one. Ava steadies herself. What choice? She asks. Caprio looks directly into her eyes, his voice both stern and kind. You can continue living as the girl the world shaped you to be, or you can start becoming the woman you were meant to be. She inhales sharply. And how do I do that? She whispers. He smiles softly, knowingly. You learn, he says, not by being shielded from consequences, but by walking through them. The courtroom waits. Ava waits. And somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath the weight of privilege, fear, anger, and years of strategic perfection, a new heartbeat begins. Steady, clear, human. Judge Caprio sets the document aside. "Miss Kingsley," he says, "your transformation has begun. The next steps will not be easy." Ava nods. "I don't want easy," she whispers. "I want honest." The judge's eyes soften. Then for the first time he says, "You're ready." Narrator's voice drifts softly. Some people break under the weight of their upbringing, but others, when the truth finally reaches them, begin to break free. As Ava Kingsley stands quietly in that small Rhode Island courtroom, she doesn't just face justice, she faces herself. The next morning, when Ava Kingsley arrives at the courthouse parking lot, she finds Judge Caprio standing beside an aging city vehicle, an old beige sedan with peeling paint and a dented bumper. It looks nothing like the gleaming luxury cars she grew up stepping into. The judge glances at her plain sweater, her tied-back hair, the absence of her usual armor of accessories. "You came," he says simply. Ava nods. "I said I would." He studies her carefully, searching for traces of the girl who strutted into his courtroom days earlier. But all he finds is someone quieter, someone stripped of the polished veneer her life demanded, someone who hasn't slept much. Today, Judge Caprio says, "You'll accompany me to the Harbor Lights Community Center. Mrs. Grant volunteers there every Thursday." Ava's grip tightens on the silver heart keychain in her pocket. "I'm a little nervous." Caprio gives a gentle smile. "Good. Nervous means you care." They get into the car. The ride is quiet, not tense, not awkward, just quiet in the way that precedes something meaningful. Outside the window, the streets transition from the brick government buildings Ava knows to uneven sidewalks and small storefronts with faded signs. A world she's never seen, though it exists only a few miles from the capital. She stares out the window and murmurs, "I didn't know this part of Providence existed." Caprio glances at her. "A lot of people don't, especially those who grow up in high places." The comment isn't cruel. It's an invitation to understand. When the car turns into the cracked parking lot of the Harbor Lights Community Center, Ava feels her pulse quicken. The building is old, 2 stories, red brick, windows covered with decals painted by children. A giant hand-painted mural shows kids of all abilities playing together under a bright sun. Judge Caprio steps out and gestures toward the entrance. "This is the part that transforms people, Ava, not the courtroom, not speeches. This. Inside, the air smells like crayons, cleaning supplies, and warm lunches. Children's laughter echoes from down the hall. A therapy dog trots happily beside a volunteer. A stack of mobility gear walkers, braces, cushions sits neatly near the front desk. Ava stands frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the noise, the movement, the unfamiliar humanity of it all. A place like this is not designed for image management. It is designed for life. Melissa Grant appears from a side room, wearing a volunteer badge and a pastel cardigan smudged with paint. Ava stiffens, unsure if she'll be welcomed. Melissa studies her for a moment, not with anger, but with careful evaluation. Then she nods. "You came." Ava swallows. "I said I would." Melissa gestures to a doorway. "We're doing art today. It gets messy. Roll up your sleeves." Ava hesitates, then slowly pushes her sleeves up past her elbows. The gesture feels symbolic, exposing vulnerability, instead of hiding behind crafted perfection. When she enters the room, children of all ages are gathered around tables covered in paper and paint trays. Some kids sit in wheelchairs. Others have leg braces or arm supports. Some move easily, others with difficulty. But they all paint with the same joyous intensity. At first, the children don't notice Ava. To them, she's not special, not powerful, not someone worth whispering about. She's just another adult. And that inadvertently becomes the greatest gift. A little girl with bright pigtails holds up a brush dripping blue paint. "Can you open this for me?" she asks, pointing to a stubborn jar. Ava takes the jar, struggling with the lid for a moment, then finally twists it open. There you go. The girl beams. Thanks. A boy nearby accidentally knocks over a cup of green paint. It splashes across Ava's sweater. He freezes, horrified. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Ava stares at the stain. Then, unexpectedly, she laughs. It's okay. Really, it looks better this way. The boy relaxes and grins. Across the room, Judge Caprio watches quietly, arms crossed, seeing every moment. Time passes. Slowly, Ava begins to melt into the environment. She helps a child steady a brush. She wipes spilled water. She hands out clean paper. She kneels beside a girl, whose hands shake when she paints, steadying the page for her so her lines don't smear. She doesn't think about cameras, or public optics, or how she looks. She thinks about each child, each small person with a world inside them, each painting a reflection of how they see themselves. Then a sudden commotion breaks the calm. A boy pushing his wheelchair hits a wet patch on the floor. The wheels slip. The chair tilts dangerously backward. Without thinking, without hesitating, without remembering who she was supposed to be, Ava lunges forward. She grabs the wheelchair, stabilizing it before it topples. The boy gasps, wide-eyed. Whoa, Ava's heart is pounding. Are you okay? He nods quickly. Yeah, thanks. That was really close. Melissa rushes over, her face tight with concern. Ava good reflexes. Ava exhales shakily. I didn't even think. Melissa finishes for her. Saw someone who needed help. That's enough. The other volunteers glance over, impressed. Even some children look at Ava with something new in their eyes. Trust. Later, when the art session ends, Melissa approaches her with a damp cloth. You've got paint on your cheek. Ava wipes it off, laughing. I think it's everywhere. It suits you, Melissa says gently. Color does. Ava looks down at her hands, smudged with blue, yellow, red. I haven't painted since I was a kid. Most people stop when they grow up, Melissa replies. But kids know something adults forget. Making a mess is how you learn. A small boy in a bright orange wheelchair rolls toward Ava with a canvas resting on his lap. He's shy but determined. Miss Ava. She kneels down to his level. Hi there. He holds out the canvas, a simple stick figure drawing. 2 characters, one tall with long blonde hair, one smaller in a wheelchair. Above them, in uneven, wobbly letters, are 2 words, thank you. Ava's breath catches. Is this for me? He nods. Yeah, 'cause you didn't let me fall, and 'cause you look nicer today. Ava laughs softly, tears pricking her eyes. Thank you. This is beautiful. Judge Caprio steps in beside her. May I see? She turns the canvas toward him. The judge's eyes warm, more than approval, more than pride. Something gentler, something paternal. You earned that, he says. Ava shakes her head slightly. I don't know if I've earned anything yet. Caprio smiles. Then you've taken the first step toward humility, understanding, that earning matters more than inheriting. They walk out of the center together, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Ava watches the children through the window, laughing, rolling, painting, living, then turns to the judge. Why did you bring me here? Because this is where people learn what really matters, Caprio replies. Not in courtrooms, not in mansions, in places where kindness is needed, not performed. Ava hugs the painting to her chest. I want to come back, even when this case is over. He nods approvingly. Then you already understand more than you realize. She takes a breath, wiping a bit of dried paint from her thumb. Judge, do you think there's hope for me? He looks at her not as a defendant or a symbol of privilege, but as a young woman trying desperately to redefine herself. I do, he says, because today you didn't act like a senator's daughter. You acted like someone's future. Ava closes her eyes briefly, letting the words settle inside her like light finding a crack in a long-shuttered room. As they walk back toward the car, the narrator's voice echoes softly. Some lessons are taught by judges, But the ones that truly change us are taught by children. And today, in a modest community center on the edge of town, a girl who once believed the world bent for her finally learned how to bend toward others. The final morning arrives with a softness Ava never expected. Sky of pale gold, sunlight glinting off the courthouse steps, and a crisp quiet that settles over the building like a held breath. She walks through the entrance alone. No aides, no political handlers, no father storming in to resolve things, just her. And this time, she chooses to take each step slowly, deliberately, as though each footfall is a promise to herself. A few people in the gallery whisper when she enters, not mockingly this time, but with a kind of curiosity, even respect. Ava doesn't rush to her seat. She nods politely at the bailiff, at the clerk, even at the officer who'd pulled her over. Not one of these gestures is for show. It's the first time she's ever walked into a room without needing to be seen. When Judge Frank Caprio appears, the room instinctively settles. Even the hum of ventilation seems to quiet. He sits, adjusts his glasses, and studies Ava with a gaze that isn't stern or indulgent but deeply observant. "Miss Kingsley," he says, "please step forward." Ava rises carrying the little painting a child gave her days earlier. The canvas is slightly bent at the corner from being held so tightly, but she refuses to let it go. It has become an anchor, a reminder, a compass. She stands before the bench and takes a steadying breath. Her voice is soft but not timid, just earnest. "Your Honor, before you give your decision, I would like to say something." Judge Caprio nods. "You may." She glances around the courtroom, this place she once saw as a nuisance, then as a battlefield, and finally as a mirror. "I came into this courtroom believing rules were meant for people without connections," she begins. "I believed consequences were negotiable, adjustable, something my family could handle with a phone call." Her throat tightens, but she continues. "I was wrong." She looks down at the painting in her hands. "I didn't understand the damage I caused, not because I didn't care, but because I never bothered to learn. I grew up thinking empathy was optional, that kindness was something you displayed at charity events, not something you lived." A few people shift quietly, absorbing her words. "But then I met Jacob," Ava says, voice trembling slightly. "I saw how much strength it takes for him to simply move through the world, and I realized how easy my life has been and how much harm I caused without even noticing." She swallows. "I don't want to be the girl in that video anymore, and I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm saying it because it's the truth." Judge Caprio listens without moving, his hands folded. Ava continues. "I've spent my whole life being told what to do, what to say, who to be. And for a long time, I thought that meant I didn't have choices. But now I see that choices matter more than anything. I made bad ones. I hurt people. I ignored responsibility." She looks up, meeting Caprio's gaze with a clarity that wasn't there before. "Your Honor, I'm ready for whatever consequences you think are fair, and I will face them on my own." A deep, resonant silence fills the room. Not a tense silence, an emotional one. A collective exhale from people who finally see a young woman stepping into her own skin. Caprio leans forward. "Miss Kingsley," he says gently, "what you have expressed today is something many people twice your age never find the courage to say." Ava's eyes shimmer, but she doesn't look away. He continues, "Justice is not only about punishment, it is about direction, and you have chosen a direction rooted in humility and growth." He stands slowly, deliberately. "In light of your actions, the legal consequences are straightforward. You will pay the standard fines for speeding and failure to comply. These fines serve only as acknowledgement of the law." Ava nods without hesitation. "But the more meaningful consequence," Caprio adds, "is one you have already begun. Understanding the weight of your actions on others." He gestures toward the painting in her hands. "You found something at the community center that cannot be bought. something no political influence can manufacture. You found your character. A faint smile touches Ava's lips, shaky but real. Therefore, Caprio says, I am adding one requirement. Ava straightens, ready. You will return to Harbor Lights Community Center every week for the next 2 months. He says, not as punishment, as continuation. A whisper runs through the room, but not in shock, in approval. Ava nods firmly. I want to. Caprio smiles warmly. I know. For a moment, they simply look at each other, the old judge with a lifetime of wisdom, and the young woman just beginning hers. Then he says, softly but with gravity, I'm proud of you, Miss Kingsley. Ava's breath catches. Her lips press together as emotion wells up, deeper than she can express. Not once in her life, not from her father, not from her mother, not from any mentor or advisor had she heard those words without an agenda behind them. Here, in a public courtroom, she hears them for the first time. Thank you, she whispers. She gathers the painting carefully, turning to leave. As she reaches the door, she stops, because an elderly woman is entering, leaning heavily on her cane. Ava steps back and holds the door open. The woman smiles gratefully. You're very kind, dear. Ava bows her head. Warm and slightly embarrassed. Thank you, ma'am. Judge Caprio notices. No cameras catch this moment. No reporters write it down. But he sees it, and he smiles softly to himself. Sometimes the most important changes are the smallest ones. Ava exits the building, sunlight brushing her face. Outside, she pulls out her phone not to call her father, not to post on social media, but to check the Harbor Lights volunteer schedule. She presses the silver heart keychain between her fingers. For once, she knows exactly what she wants to do. Narrator's voice closes the chapter. She entered the courtroom believing her family name would protect her from consequences, but she left with something far more powerful, an identity shaped not by privilege, but by choice. Because real power isn't inherited. It's earned, one small act of humanity at a time. In life, we often assume privilege creates strength, but more often, it creates distance, a wall between who we are and who we could become. Ava's story reminds us that true growth begins the moment we stop hiding behind excuses, reputations, and the comforting belief that our actions won't ripple outward. Accountability isn't the enemy, it's the doorway to freedom. And empathy isn't a burden, it's the bridge that makes us human. Maybe you've met someone like Ava. Maybe at times you've been her. We all carry moments we'd rather ignore, but facing them with honesty is how we turn shame into strength. If this story moved you, tell us. What did it make you think about your own choices? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more stories of justice, kindness, and transformation, hit subscribe so you never miss the next chapter.